Ronnie, I think in the sport of thoroughbred horse racing and the care, the aftercare of these magnificent creatures, the more things change, the more things stay the same. But I think it's so important to have a plan going forward, particularly with the scrutiny that is prevalent from the SPCA or other healthcare organizations and with the media on us. It's a very, very buoyant sport, but it also has a very sad downside for those horses that aren't cared for after their racing career is over.
Andrew, yes. I think we all who are involved in the sport and who love the sport have that responsibility to look after thoroughbred racehorses when their racing days are over. And that's really what the National Horse Trust and the horse care units around the country do and try to achieve. And they do other things as well, and perhaps I should just touch on that. And that is really the work that is being done in the townships and in other areas where basically what the units are doing through the country is going out and teaching people who have horses or donkeys which they use in their work, teaching them how to look after them, how you properly look after a horse or a donkey, and how you ensure therefore that equine remains healthy. And that's extremely valuable work that's being done by the units around the country.
Ronnie, as the chairman of this organization, you've been chairman for many, many years. For the uninitiated, just give us some sort of insight into the length of your service.
I can't even remember, Andrew. Yeah, I think I've been chairman now for about 10, 12 years. Ken Palmer really started the National Horse Trust back 25 years ago or more, when the Association of Race Clubs was really funding it. And he, through the ARCSA, managed to get funding for the units to start them up, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal, here in the Highveld. And I've carried on from that with the able support of people like Jacko Guillemot and John Aubrey and Tom Fowler in the Western Cape. And, you know, what we have found, though, in the last couple of years, and I think this is vital to where we are at the moment, is that with the credit crunch and what's happened since 2008, even although we're doing the very best we can to raise the funds for all the units, it just isn't possible to get it from individual donations. So what we are doing is approaching the racing industry and saying, look, we think that the racing industry has a responsibility here as well, and we'd like there to be an overall solution to how the Horse Trust and the units are funded. And I must say we're very pleased at the reaction that Pumalela and Rian du Plessis have had to this. They've said, fine, we're quite happy with that principle, but we think that what should happen is that everybody needs to, all the participants need to contribute fairly to that. And so we're actually here today to talk to all the stakeholders in the industry, and hopefully we'll get a good outcome.
Well, I think it's rather fortuitous that we've approached this matter at the time that we have, because obviously the main thrust of this interview is to highlight the endeavours of the Highveld Horse Care Unit and the National Horse Trust Golf Day, which takes place on the 16th. And that's obviously an opportunity, a localised opportunity to get people to buy things on auction and to contribute to the coffers. But the bigger picture is far more important, which is the very reason that you're here at Turffontein today.
No, absolutely, Andrew, yeah. I mean, things like raffles, which people contribute from all around the country, and golf days, which are run all around the country to support the units, are great in getting individual people to contribute something towards this particular endeavour. But yeah, there's a bigger picture, and we need to really go for that bigger picture if we're going to really make sure that there are incredibly dedicated people who work at the units, and they need to have some security of their jobs, which they don't have at the moment, because they're really living from hand to mouth. So we need proper funding, and that's really what strategically we're looking for.
The interesting thing for me is if you take an isolated incident like a lady like Megan Hope, for example, who is completely immersed and passionate about what she does. She's in a jurisdiction where there's a huge amount of horse traffic, and they've spent vast amount of money on the poly track there to make it a buoyant racing jurisdiction. And yet somehow I get the feeling that perhaps she doesn't get the financial support that maybe Bev Seaborn Bauer does at this unit or the Western Cape. All of these areas are as important as each other.
There's no doubt that Megan needs more help than she's getting at the moment. And hopefully if we can get this bigger picture story organised from the racing industry, Megan, I think, would get some of the support that she deserves.
Ronnie, this meeting hasn't taken place yet, but please give us some sort of insight into some of the questions that you will be asking of the captains of industry in order to sustain this onerous task that has been bestowed upon you.
We need somewhere between 4 and 5 million rand a year in order to sustain the horse trust and the units around the country, and that's what we're going to ask, the stakeholders in the racing industry to come up with. How they decide that should be broken up really is up to them. But that's what we're really asking for, because unless we get that kind of money, it's not sustainable in the long term. We will continue, obviously, to get the individual fundraise. We'll continue having golf days and raffles and all that sort of stuff, because that's an essential part of what he's done. But we need that other funding to make sure that there are reserves there that can deal with buying new vehicles, getting stables. The Western Cape is now looking like they're going to have a new premises, and that requires a lot of money to organise. So that's the big picture, and that's what we're really trying to achieve.
And finally, we touched very briefly on this yesterday off camera. We were talking about Kimberley in the Northwestern Cape, which is also a melting pot for a lot of horses that are not good enough to race in Port Elizabeth or other centres, and perhaps they are also short in respect of an actually formalised unit to take care of these horses once they have finished their racing careers.
Absolutely, Andrew. We race in Kimberley. As we know, Bloemfontein closed down, and Kimberley really became a viable racing unit, but they need to have a horse care unit there, because really Kimberley is the end of the road for a lot of horses, and we think that it's absolutely essential that we have a viable horse care unit in Kimberley very shortly.